Hi, I'm Kristal Goodman, the Head of Product Innovation at THG Labs, and I'm really thrilled to have you with us today. At THG Labs, just in case you don't know us, we've been a trusted product development and manufacturing partner within the beauty industry for the last 3 decades. And today we're here to share our passion for innovation and sustainability. So during this webinar, we're joined by industry leaders who are equally committed to sustainable beauty. From CFF, the global supplier of Sensocell, fibers, powders and scrubs. Alessa here will be guiding us through the art of sustainable formulation. Welcome, Alessa.
Thank you, Kristal.
Alessa is the product manager for personal and home care. So during this webinar, she'll be able to share her insights into the world of sustainable cosmetics. And we have the visionary Terence Chung. Hello, Terence.
Hello, everyone.
He's the founder and head geek of FRUU, which I love, a brand dedicated to offering fresh UK-made natural cosmetics sourced from nutrient-rich fruits and fruit waste byproducts. Today, we're going to be here to inspire you, educate you, and empower you to shape the future of beauty in a sustainable way. We will also have someone from the Covalo team joining us. Covalo make beauty product development fast and easy by connecting brands to the right suppliers of ingredients, packaging and services, and they'll be able to answer any questions on how to source upcycled ingredients. So now that you know a bit more about us, we'd love to know more about you watching us from your offices and homes. Let us know which countries you're joining us from in the chat. And if you have any questions during the webinar, just simply ask them in that chat area. We'll have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, and we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. Welcome to everyone who's joined us. Let's start this webinar. So Terence, I'm going to start by asking the first question to you. So what are upcycled ingredients for anyone that's not quite up to speed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty broad terms, I guess, for sort of any ingredients that comes from, I would say, byproducts or potentially sometimes a waste stream of the existing industry, which is quite often at the moment food industry we're focusing on, I think. But there's also quite a lot of sort of side stream and byproducts that comes from sort of higher in the sort of agricultural industry. So we can even talk about the forestry industry where there's quite a lot of pine needles, for example, that becomes available as part of the forestry process. So yeah, it's a very wide range of ingredients, but most of the time from basically unwanted parts of some of the other process. So, for example, peels and seeds that comes from the juicing industry. For example, fruits that is maybe not of the right shape or sizes, and therefore goes into a waste stream usually, but it's then given a kind of second life in a way in the upcycle stream, and that's kind of what we try to do as well as a brand. But yeah, I think it's increasingly becoming more popular, obviously, with the backdrop of climate change. A lot more people are becoming more eco-conscious about their life choices, and therefore upcycle ingredients has become a thing where I think it's offering both some environmental benefits as well as some marketing benefits as well from product creation point of view.
Thank you. So is that kind of what inspired the story of FRUU? Looking at this kind of market and thinking, how to do things, in a more sustainable way?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when we first started, I didn't think the word upcycle even exists in the cosmetic industry yet. And so we're trying to find our way around in terms of telling our story in a way that people would not oppose to. So at the beginning, we're talking about fruit waste, with the byproducts, but a lot of people have like slightly negative connotation about it because of terminology they don't come across very often, and quite often they think, oh, fruit waste, does it mean like some rotting apple from supermarket? So there's a lot of education piece behind that. But I think at the beginning we weren't completely waste focused either. We just wanted to find basically the most sustainable ingredients we can find from the natural world as renewable. And looking at the supply chain perspective, a lot of the ingredients that you can still find comes from monoculture, agriculture that is potentially causing deforestation, water shortages, and other issues. And therefore, we thought we should look at something that's perishable and something that's that we're making a lot already from a food industry or other industry, but it's not being fully utilized. And that's why we went down this route. And it seems like the industry has slowly caught on to the trend now, which is a great initiative and a great time to do that right now.
How important do you think that sustainability story is to your consumers? Do you think it really influences their purchasing?
Personally, I would like to see more of that happening. I would say on the ground, I think people are definitely aware of the sustainability side of their products, but I think a lot of people are maybe a little bit confused or misinformed or not fully educated on what it means to have a product that's sustainable. A lot of people are still very much focused on the packaging side of things. We know that in the UK, when people talk about sustainable products, they very much, the first thing they think about is the packaging, which is also rightly so a really huge source of pollution or use of non-renewable material. But yeah, that's, I think, much less emphasis until recently, looking at what the ingredients of a product is doing in the environment. I think there are some consensus about palm oil amounts like sort of customers, but palm oil is also a very complex issue that you can spend a whole day talking about. So yeah, I think sustainability is something that people use definitely is looking more into, but recently, because of the cost of living situation, I think people are beginning to neglect it a little bit more and be more price conscious when they come down to products. And I think recently there's a huge trend looking more into performance rather than looking at sustainability. But I think it's still a trend that is going to linger around unless the climate crisis is over, which it's kind of hard to see the end of it at the moment. So yeah, it will definitely be around for another good 20, 30 years. But I think the communication piece will have to improve in due course for customer to really realize the environmental benefits of some of their purchase decisions.
Absolutely. And to all our consumers, the performance of the product is what drives them to repurchase, right? So I think, it's not necessarily a compromise in terms of performance to be utilizing these types of ingredients. It's just how best to message that kind of directly to customers, I think. So over to you, Alessa. I want to talk a bit more about formulating with upcycled ingredients. But first, could you share your story and explain to us why CFF have chosen to use upcycling to produce their ingredients?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kristal. And well, who is CFF? CFF is a producer of natural cellulose fibers for over 40 years now. And while natural cellulose is a well-established ingredient in a lot of industries such as food, feed, pharma, filtration, and also in more industrial applications. So CFF started in the personal care industry in 2015, so not too long ago, with our natural range of cellulose fibers, Sensocell powders, fibers, and scrubs for different applications. We have particles available for a lot of applications such as skincare, oral care, color cosmetics, baby care, oral care. Well, a lot of different types to do or things to do with natural cellulose. So what we offer is cellulose particles in different particle shape. We have fibrous and globular particles. They also differ in size within the range from 1 to 2,000 microns. And the third difference is the origin. So here we come to the upcycling topic of our webinar. We have wood and bamboo cellulose, which is of non-upcycling origin, and also we have a lot of products from or with upcycling origin, which is oat, wheat, apple, sugarcane, and corn, cellulose, and plant fibers and particles. So why are we using upcycling products for the production of our products? Well, actually, all our products are made of byproducts from the food and beverage industry, and a lot of those byproducts offer very good characteristics to turn them into natural cellulose or plant fibers. And, well, why shouldn't we use it as a source for the production of our materials? So, for example, our oat and wheat products are all made from a byproduct within the production of flour. While we all know that flour is only made from the grain, and the remaining structure building parts of the plant, which is the oat and wheat straw, can be turned into natural oat powders, fibers, and scraps. So that is the story behind CFF and why we are using upcycling ingredients.
Thank you. I'm really curious to know what the sourcing process is like for upcycled ingredients. Does it differ from traditionally produced ingredients? Are there kind of any challenges that you need to be aware of?
So actually, in case of upcycled cellulose, there is actually not a very big difference in comparison to non-upcycled cellulose. It's very comparable. Of course, there are different techniques to separate the cellulose from the plant. When we're talking about oat or wheat plants, for example, it's a different technique to separate it from wood, for example. So the cellulose needs to be separated from the other main components of the plant cell wall, the lignin and the hemicellulose. But actually, in general, it's comparable, and those processes are well established because natural cellulose, as I already explained, exists for a very long period of time. So it's well established. We have a very consistent quality, and also those processes have been adapted to current sustainability standards over the year. So I can only say in terms of natural cellulose, there's not a very big difference or so, yeah.
And it's great to see such like really useful functional ingredients, because I think often when we think of upcycling, we're quite used to looking at extracts or actives or seed oils and things that we kind of know very well. But I think it's really important that you're bringing these kind of additional formulation aids to the table.
I agree.
I'm going to ask you if you think formulating with upcycled ingredients is difficult.
Well, actually, that's a very easy answer for CFF, because I can say no, it's not very difficult. Actually, it's very easy. If you compare it to non-upcycled cellulose, it's no difference. Cellulose is inert. You don't have to adjust the temperature or the pH value. All our cellulose particles, whether non-upcycled or upcycled, are stable at stirring. Only some particles need to be treated carefully under homogenization. So only the long fibers and big particles are a little sensitive to shear force. And in general, it's very easy. So some people are afraid of using upcycled ingredients because of certain techniques they have to add to the formulation process. But in case of natural cellulose, I can just say you don't have to do that.
Perfect. And in your experience, Terence, have you had any challenges with using upcycled ingredients?
Yeah, I think the similar sentiment there in terms of there's not particular difference between the upcycled ingredients and usual natural ingredients. The only biggest tricky point is if you want as much of your product as made from upcycled ingredients, then you need to dig deeper in terms of finding the right components and making sure all of the ingredients are compatible, just as with all natural ingredients in general. There's always this hurdle because obviously we have a much narrower chemical sort of space to use once you narrow it down to a natural. And then if you were to narrow it down to just upcycled ingredients, then there's that constraint. But if your formula doesn't exclusively have to use upcycled ingredients, it's a lot easier if you were to have to use one or two actives, for example, or seed oil. But yeah, definitely things like cellulose. If you were to replace obviously a carbomer with cellulose, obviously you'll have that challenge whether it's upcycled or not anyway. So So yeah, challenge remains within the natural formula realm, but it's not necessarily just applied to upcycled ingredients, but yeah, just all natural ingredients in general.
That makes sense, because obviously upcycled ingredients, as we know, are subject to the same rigorous testing processes, and they need to be, you know, the same quality and standard as their natural counterparts, don't they? So it makes sense, absolutely, that it shouldn't be an issue. Okay, so I was just wondering, I think I know the answer, but are there any do's and don'ts that businesses should keep in mind with formulating upcycled ingredients from your point of view, Alessa?
Well, actually, I can say there's only, I would say, do it. We actually made the experience that sometimes we explain customers, okay, with product A, you can create effect X, Y, Z, and then he comes up with a totally new effect. So I would say just test it, try it, and there's so much more to discover, some effects we don't even know of yet. So I don't think that there's a don't in case of natural upcycled cellulose.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered why we should be using upcycled ingredients, but I do want to touch upon any of the sort of regulatory considerations that we need to be aware of. So in the absence of a global definition, you know, what would be our potential challenges, do you think, Terence?
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen from the natural definition, I think the definition will evolve based on obviously the how the industry interprets it, how the marketing team decide to interpret some of it, and there might potentially be a case of abuse, which we've seen from even the natural side of the cosmetic industry even right now. But the challenge there is, unless there's a governmental party to sort of restrict the use of the terms and make sure that the terms has appropriate sort of conditions attached to those terms, it will remain a little bit open and a little bit messy, just as natural product still is, and hopefully that would evolve. And as we have seen with upcycled ingredients, quite a lot of it is starting from the food industry. So there's quite a lot of movement from the food industry at the moment to use upcycled ingredients, and there's certification attached to that in the America, as we know, but there's none at the moment from the cosmetic point of view. And perhaps there will be a case of that happening if enough people see the sense of making use of these material, and it's actually best for the environment to make use of these material. But at the moment, it's still very premature. We'd like to see how that progresses, and I think it's something that everyone from the industry should participate in terms of making sure that we almost like not necessarily self-govern, but kind of establish an ethos of how best to use these terminology and make sure that we don't just go a little bit wild with it, like we've done, I guess, sometimes with the natural ingredients.
I think there is a concern around greenwashing, which I think is really unfortunate, because obviously as formulators and brands and ingredient creators, we're doing what we feel is the right thing by the consumers by using these ingredients. I think the way that I understand it is that you can say an ingredient is upcycled, you can support it. But if you want to talk about it being a low impact source, for example, you would need to quantify it against a primary sourced ingredient. That's the way. So there is going to be a need at some point for us to be able to tell the richness of the story of upcycling. And I think that, you know, it would be really good if like you said, that people could kind of join together a little bit and kind of make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons, for a conscientious point of view, but also kind of helping consumers catch up a little bit with our journey and our thoughts about these ingredients. Is there anything you wanted to add there, Alessa?
Maybe just a little wish for the future, or for all the regulations and certifications coming up, that there is like, I know that there or there will be certain standards, a lot of certification systems and so on, like we do have in the natural cosmetics world. But I wish for, a little bit more consistency and transparency, that it's very easier for the consumer to understand, for the cosmetic producer, and also for the raw material producers to fulfill all this and to enter the upcycling world.
Absolutely. So on this, I'd like to kind of open up really and talk a bit more about what we think the future of upcycled ingredients looks like. So I'm going to put this question to both of you. How would you see the role of upcycled ingredients evolving in the cosmetic industry over the next few years?
Well, actually, I guess that it will play a very important role in the future, such as all topics related to sustainability and naturalness do. And also, I think that the consumers of today are very eco-conscious. So we, and especially Gen Z, is well aware about sustainability and also about our impact on the world, and that we have to reduce waste and so on. So I guess it will gain an importance, and people will be aware about it and take care of this topic.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think that's definitely in the future, and I think with more government homing into how we can sort of live our life a lot more sustainably. Obviously, we have started with the electric car, and how there's so much government subsidies going on to make sure that the whole supply chain of electric car is going to work in the future. And I think that's slowly going to trickle down into the petrochemical industry, and we don't know what's going to happen, but potentially there could be a carbon tax with any use of petrochemical in the future, and then therefore that also means the natural ingredients and potentially upcycled ingredients are going to be a lot more cost competitive, and makes it a much more compelling source of material for everyone, rather than just it being a marketing add-on, but it will potentially be cost saving potentially in the future if there were governments and system in place to make sure that these ingredients, which is potentially the most sustainable that you would ever find, would actually be making an economical sense across the board as well.
Absolutely. Are there any potential innovations you think might shape the future of upcycled ingredients and their applications within cosmetics?
Maybe I'll start first because I was thinking about it. I think one thing that I've been talking to ingredient suppliers about quite a lot, even like 3-4 years ago, is if there's a way to provide like a universal metrics on the carbon footprints, or potentially even nitrogen or phosphorus footprint of the products as universal standard, just like how you pick up a packet of food in a supermarket, you'd see those traffic light system for salt, fats, and calories, for example. If that type of system, I can see it developing potentially in the future when everyone has to be a lot more well-versed and vetted on how much environmental impact is each of the product contributing. And when that is in place, then I think the upcycled ingredients would be the green lights for everything. And then the petrochemical would be showing red when you're choosing such ingredients. And that will make it so much more transparent in terms of why we should be choosing that ingredients, rather than at the moment it's a little bit vague in terms of, we know the supply chain is clean, but how much cleaner is it? Like, it's quite hard to quantify at the moment. And I think in the future, if that's like a common practice for the industry, I think that would just make picking these ingredients so much a much easier choice for formulators and brands.
Absolutely love the idea of a traffic light system. We've been thinking along the same lines, and I think what we need to do is make that choice so easy for the consumer to make, but also kind of, to be able to have an industry standard that we all conform to, I think is really essential. How about you, Alessa? Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, maybe I can add that it will be a very big challenge to have applications tailored with 100% upcycled ingredients, and I don't even know if that would be possible. And also not only the product itself, but also the packaging. Well, we have some companies like, for example, FRUU, they are using a lot of upcycled ingredients, but I can imagine that it is very hard to transform commodities into products with upcycling origin. I don't know if it's even possible, and that's a lot of work to do for the R&D departments then. So maybe that is an idea for the future.
Absolutely. It's something we've been working on at THG Labs. And I think, arguably, the market has moved on so dramatically over the last couple of years that if you'd have asked me 2 years ago, are we anywhere near doing 100% upcycled? I'd be like, well, we can do oils. And then it would be a bit of a ... But actually, there are some upcycled emulsifiers. We've been working with some upcycled preservatives. And actually even some upcycled fragrances. Some of the fragrance houses we work with are starting to use. But I have to be clear, it is very limited. And I think, there's still an argument for using conventional ingredients in there to ensure the product performance. But give us another 2 years. And it would be really interesting to see how that plays out as our suppliers kind of catch up. I think there are now upcycled surfactants as well as the fragrances and emulsifiers and so on. So it's really exciting to see how the industry is moving on in terms of those kind of future innovations. And also I think it's quite interesting to kind of think, I mean, obviously we know that there's a huge problem with food waste, but what's quite interesting as well is seeing companies that are looking at, their own waste and how that they can valorize as many different elements from every single plant that they grow. And that kind of circular approach, I think, will become more and more important to people that are still growing ingredients, is making sure, I mean, I know it doesn't fall necessarily under the definition of upcycle, but that whole plant philosophy and creating no waste, I think, is where we want to see innovation come from as well. So I think we've kind of covered in quite detail the future, but there's just one more thing I wanted to ask, is whether there's any sort of collaborative efforts you've seen or industry initiatives in progress to help support the adoption of upcycling, or do you feel it's really up to brands' sustainability goals and our eco-conscious consumers to drive the change?
I think at the moment we're seeing quite a lot of alliance going on, especially in the UK, in terms of like just trying to tackle the whole big up sustainability drive. And I think that's definitely a positive thing, that brands are working together rather than against each other in terms of trying to kind of to be claimed, oh, we're the only one who's sustainable. So I think that has to continue, and I think we'll only win when we get to a point where sustainability is not even an attractive term to be used in a product anymore. Just like maybe what vegan has become for the last maybe 2-3 years. And I think, that's only the norm that we need to adopt, because otherwise we just won't have a planet going forward. But I think definitely there has to be a lot more collaborative effort in terms of communicating these type of facts to customers, and put I guess every brand has a vetted interest to communicate their brand, and therefore there will always be a lot of marketing spin around some of the messages. But I think that there ideally has to be kind of like a common body, ideally, to then reach out to customer and then educate customer in terms of what we are all trying to do as an industry going forward, and for customer to then realize those benefits, and then maybe to then see that these brands are complying to these, and therefore that gives us a slightly more competitive advantage over other brands that is maybe claiming to do things and then is using much cheaper ingredients, maybe significant amounts of the ingredients that's used are still synthetic or non-renewable. So I think everyone has to work together, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out in terms of the education piece. I think especially now customers just have so much information that they need to digest in order to understand how to make a decision on a product. It'll be tricky to see how that plays out in terms of forcing even more information on customers. So, for example, like DCM is doing a really good job in terms of communicating science behind beauty, and it would be good for all brands to adopt that in some ways as well. But it's hard to get everyone on board, I guess. But sustainability, I think we're moving towards the right direction.
I think also it's challenging, I think, and I've noticed some of the questions come up as well. It's like we obviously, we're quite comfortable with the term of upcycling within our industry and within the UK, but I think for many of us all the brands that I work with are global. It's trying to find what's really going to resonate across all of those different markets in different ways. And although we're still using upcycled ingredients, we're not necessarily educating the end customer that they're there, because we haven't, I don't think, quite landed on the right language to have that kind of global approach. I think it's important we still use those ingredients and we support those ingredients. It's just they're still fairly low down, I guess, in terms of messaging outside of UK, Europe, I would say.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that as well, because we do sell to, for example, Asia, and we've got some customers from Europe, definitely, and it's definitely different in the US as it is in the UK or Australia. And I think the pioneer at the moment, I would say, in terms of sustainability, is probably France. They are like really up for upcycle ingredients. They're really for like solid ingredients. But if you were to try to sell a solid product to Asia, people think it's a substandard product, and the adoption is a lot lower. So the marketing and storytelling would have to be quite different. That's what we've seen so far.
That's really interesting. Anything for you to add, Alessa?
Well, actually, I agree to all you both have said. And just maybe to add, I think maybe we can act a little, how can I say, like a copycat from the fashion or the food industry. They have come so much more far than we in the cosmetic industry did so far. So, yeah, I think we can have a look on that maybe.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to move on to your questions in a moment. I'm just going to kind of give you my take on the sort of key themes that I think that we've covered. So I hope that everybody that's watching feels really inspired to increase their use of upcycled ingredients in formulations. After all, the concept of upcycling, of using every last element of what we grow, is not really new at all to our industry. Some of the earliest ingredients we used, such as lanolin, seed oils, including grapeseed oil, even essential oils from orange peel, these have always come from this upcycled process. After all, I think it's only waste if we don't use it. And I think that's a really kind of important message here, is that I know some people might not be comfortable with the term waste. What we really need to think about is just seeing these valuable byproducts from industries, as we touched on before, from food, drink, forestry, fragrance. Instead of seeing that as waste to be discarded, we utilize these highly active, beneficial resources to create our future actives. More emulsifiers, please, surfactants, fragrances and preservatives. So, I've said it's very encouraging to see the innovation in this space, and the market has moved dramatically in the last couple of years. But I think it's really important that circular beauty is our goal. It's not only relatively simple to incorporate this philosophy in our product development, it's really essential we do this, and we do what we can to reduce our burden on the Earth's resources. So I just wanted to ask you, Teresa, I'm really interested to know, are you seeing like an increase in interest within upcycling on the Covalo platform?
Hi, Kristal. Yes, and that's one of the reasons why Covalo decided to go for upcycling as kind of the big topic for this couple of months, because we have seen a trend in the demand for upcycling going up quite dramatically. In 2021, it was our 10th most used filter. In 2022, it was our 3rd most used filter. And this year it became our 2nd most used filter within the sustainability filters. So we see a lot of interest and a lot of curiosity from formulators to explore this. And And maybe I can give you a quick overview of what I've seen recently within not only the portfolio of upcycled ingredients that are listed, but also how people are searching for them. And we noticed that in terms of portfolio, more than like 70% of all ingredient functions are on Covalo. More than 70% are covered. This have on average more than 150% the amount of certifications than the average ingredient. And this also applies to claim substantiation. They tend to have 2 times more than the average ingredient listed. This can obviously be biased by suppliers behind upcycled ingredients wanting to have a more complete profile and to their ingredients to be sure that it has the right visibility and it has it goes with the education that's necessary sometimes with these ingredients. But it's a massive difference in terms of how many certifications and how much it has like claim substantiation going along with the ingredients. And then something we noticed in terms of demand is that across personal care in general, active ingredients are, as a function, the one that's most searched for. This applies to upcycled ingredients too, in the same way that it applies to ingredients in general. Something that we noticed that's a bit different and that we found interesting is that there is a preference for actually using humectants and protectants from upcycled sourced over virgin sources. And in terms of applications, we also saw a curious little difference where most of the personal care industry, like the biggest amount of search and demand is for hair care and skincare products. Ingredients that are suitable for skincare and hair care in terms of applications. And in upcycling, there's a even bigger trend for skincare than for the average. But then makeup comes pretty high up in terms of applications of the ingredients that people are looking for, much higher than for average ingredients. And I think these were some of the little pearls that we noticed recently looking at the data in terms of demand from the upcycled ingredients on Covalo.
It's really good to see. Good to see that increase in demand and interest there. Absolutely. Okay, shall we go over to some questions now? I think the first one I have, excuse me while I just catch up. So we have a question from Anna. Are all ingredients for skincare or also for home care natural cleaning products? It's not an area that I'm au fait with home care, but presumably there are crossover ingredients between the two. Alessa, have you got experience there within your CFF background?
Well, we also offer ingredients for home care application. We do have ingredients with Upcycling Origin. For the moment, we concentrated more on the natural topics regarding the sustainability, biodegradability, and so on. So that is also, we all know it's a big trend in home care as well. Not that much as in personal care, but still, well, it is a big trend. And well, yes, we do offer upcycled ingredients in home care as well.
So we're told by, I believe, Tuna, they're developing a 95% upcycled facial serum, but the consumers, especially Gen Z, seem to be more focused on what's working for them rather than the eco-credentials of a product. I think that's probably true of lots of generations, if I'm completely honest. But what key areas do you think would need to be highlighted for marketing purposes? I guess this one would be good for you, Terence.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one because I think we're seeing a lot of drive that's coming from, for example, social media and at the moment TikTok, and so much of it is kind of driven by the visual storytelling. So I think so much of it therefore becomes, instead of trying to sell how sustainable your product is, I think you have to set it in a much more holistic way and telling a really compelling story as a whole, rather than just saying like how sustainable this product is, because people don't find it very relatable. I think it's quite hard to say, for example, how palm oil is causing deforestation and then people react to that when they see orangutan going extinct, for example, similar to what Blue Planet has done in terms of the plastic waste issue. Everyone see how much plastic waste they're producing every day, every week, and they see it in landfills, for example. There's no emotional attachment, but the moment you see, for example, a turtle is stuck with like some straws in their nose, and the whole world wants to ban plastic straws, so which is a great thing, but it also just tells you so much about how you should tell a story rather than focusing on facts, which is something that scientists and people that's a lot more technically minded tend to go into. So your marketing team will have to do a lot of heavy lifting, I think, to make it all work together well.
I think it's as we've kind of touched upon as well. It's really the performance and the appearance of the formulation. Sustainability comes a little bit further down for a reason to purchase. I think there's many people that align with brands that do a good job of their sustainable storytelling, but actually it's not necessarily the key marketing drive behind launching those products. I think I really applaud what you're doing in terms of that high percentage upcycled, but I think it's kind of almost like a secondary or tertiary story. It needs to be how that product performs, how that product will, affect your overall appearance or how you feel. There's a lot more of emotions going on behind a purchasing marketing story, I believe. Okay, the next question is from Jessica, directed to me as a formulator. What's the most exciting upcycled ingredient you've discovered? I think for me, it was a couple of years ago, we were at a trade show in the States, and we had a real eureka moment when we met a company called Carbon Wave, who've developed an emulsifier called Sea Balance. And this has been created because there is a certain type of seaweed called sargassum, which is a floating seaweed, and it was becoming a huge nuisance to beach and tourism industries. It was over proliferating because of the rise in the temperature of the ocean. And I can't remember how many millions of tons was washing up on the beaches of these, I think Mexico and the Caribbean got hit the hardest. And they were, the hotels and the businesses were literally just bringing forklift trucks over to kind of like scoop it all up and then throw it into landfill. So as the seaweed was degrading, it was creating all this methane. So this amazing company, Carbon Wave, have managed to use this seaweed, obviously not all of it, but a decent amount of this seaweed to create an upcycled emulsifier, which actually also feels really good. I think this is where you can kind of get a bit more excited. It's not just holding the formulation together, but it feels really good in formulations. And I just thought it was a really good, ambitious project. And the more people use it, the better for the planet. So it was probably the most exciting one I've discovered. So we have the next question is, could you please give an example of any product in the market which is already using upcycled ingredients in their claims or communications? I always think about the Upcycled beauty company, Upcycled. They have an incredible story. I think they originally started as one person's trash is another man's treasure. And they put that into initials and nobody was really getting it. So they're now just called Upcycled Beauty Co. And they're doing a great job in terms of communication and products and so on. I think they do tend to be kind of, any brands that I've seen talking about them, it tends to be UK based that I've seen. I don't know if anyone's got any other examples.
I was going to mention a very well-known brand that we've had a recent, very good conversation with about upcycled ingredients, Lush. Mm-hmm. Lush focuses more on regenerative in general and not just upcycled in particular. For them, they don't focus the communication on upcycled because for them, as I think as Terence was saying before, it's kind of almost, it's the way it should be. It's not something that should be communicated. It's everything they do. It's embedded in who they are. And so they don't do, they focus, as I was saying, on the regenerative in general, upcycle being one of the ways within that regenerative. And they have several suppliers with whom they work from A to Z for like everything that they need. They're very, very particular with or very strict about the suppliers that they bring on board. And they do, to one of the other questions that I think was out there, they do say that for small brands, the hard part can be starting with like finding the right suppliers, with the supply chain complexity, having enough scale. But then it's worth it because older consumers are with them for this regenerative approach to everything they do in every product and packaging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me myself, I can name two brands. They're both French, actually. One of them is like called Catalyst, and so they have this whole background story of trying to source waste banana fruits from a particular part of the world, and obviously banana. There's so much waste involved because there's a really narrow ripening window, so there's a lot going to waste, and they use that as a central part of their story. I mean, a slightly more established and older brand called Delay. They use obviously upcycle grapes for ages. They never talk about it, and now people realize actually they've been doing it for a while. And but yeah, I think that there are definitely a couple more examples out there, but they don't communicate it from a upcycle point of view as much as the others, definitely.
Mm-hmm. So another question is, which countries or markets do you feel are being more aware or interested in the upcycling concept?
For myself, definitely the French. I think I'm seeing a lot in the French market. I mean, even before we're doing it, I think there's at least 2 or 3 other people that's doing something that's similar, but might not be communicated as upcycle, but more just sustainability or just selling the story. But I think the UK is quite receptive to it as well. But and maybe even Scandi as well, because they quite often do have a very sustainably orientated lifestyle choice. But I think US and Asia is less so at the moment, so I'd say.
Mm-hmm. So how easy is it to expand internationally with respect to ingredient sourcing? So I know from your point of view, Alessa, you've got an abundant source of different feedstocks, if you like, for your cellulose powder. I think it really depends on the ingredient. And I think, there is such a huge amount of food waste, and waste from the juicing industry is not going to go away quickly. So I think it's, as long as you've chosen a sensible ingredient, and chances are if it's been commercialized, whoever's created that ingredient would agree that there's good availability. So it's just about making sure you've got that transparency and a good relationship with your supplier, I would say, to make sure you've got the right level of availability.
Yeah, I agree to that. Actually, I can say for cellulose or our natural cellulose, all our upcycled products are sourced from European agriculture, so we concentrate on that. But of course, there are also other raw materials available, such as bamboo, which is mainly from the Asian region. So maybe also you have to make a little compromise on that if you want to enter the upcycling world.
Mm-hmm. And a question from Abby. How do you think we might struggle with transparency of supply chains for upcycled materials? For example, upcycled coffee materials. It's quite apparent that the feedstocks and origin could be quite vast.
Yeah, I mean, from a brand's point of view, a lot of it, because we are not the primary producer of those ingredients, and actually there are definite sort of vested interests for suppliers to not allow people to know how they acquire the supply chain, and therefore it can be a bit muddled. I think the amounts of information that we'll like to get is still way more than what our suppliers can provide. And in the real world, I'd like to be able to visit the farm where it's made and visit a factory where it's processed. And yeah, I think that would always be the struggle, I think, for brand, unless you've got exclusive partnership with certain material supplier. But that would also mean you might have to be a multinational conglomerate in order to reach that level. Yeah.
Okay, so last question for you, Teresa, from Agnes. Where can we find a list of all suppliers doing upcycled ingredients? And is there any split across the performance claims they can cover?
Yes, that's a very good one for Covalo to answer. I'm going to share my screen so I can quickly guide through how you can find that on Covalo. As we were saying before, we have more than 400 upcycled ingredients listed, so it's quite an easy one to go to if you're looking for upcycled. So you are on the search index of Covalo, you go here to sustainability claims, and you can filter only by upcycled ingredients. Right now we have 407. And now if you have any other criteria to the search you have right now, you mentioned performance claims, correct? You can, within the performance claims, put them in alphabetical order. And now select, for example, anti-aging with UV protection. And you're down from more than 70,000 ingredients to 400 to 6. And so you have your search quite trimmed down. So now you can go into a bit more detail. Here you have all the different details about the ingredients. If you don't know the difference between these ones too well, you can compare them side by side, which makes it much easier. You have all the sustainability claims side by side, the performance claims side by side, and it makes it much easier for you to see which one is the right one for your formulation. And then if you really like one of them, then you can bookmark it and leave it for your later searches, or you can directly go and, for example, download the documents or request for a sample, a quote, and your details will be saved for your next orders. So I think this will make your upcycling ingredient search much easier. And as I was saying before, the upcycling suppliers on Covalo seem to be particularly more keen than the average to really have all the information and all the documentation carefully up to date and very complete ingredient information. So that will make your life much easier.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That looks incredible. Okay, so I think that kind of wraps up for this amazing webinar. I think it's been really inspiring to speak to everybody. Thank you so much all for the questions that you've provided as well. If anything occurs to you later on and you still want to reach out, then there will be possible to be able to discuss in more detail with us any subjects you think we didn't cover or you'd like to learn more about. So from Terence, Alessa, Teresa and myself, thank you very much for joining. It's been a real pleasure.